All right, let's just jump right in. You know those intricate, beautiful symbols you see on temple walls? The ones from ancient Egypt? Well, what if I told you that those ancient pictures are actually the direct ancestors of the very letters you're looking at right now? Yeah. Today we're going to crack a 5,000-year-old code and uncover the secret origin of our alphabet.
So the ancient Egyptians actually called their writing Medu Neter. And for them, this wasn't just, a way to keep track of taxes or record history. No, they believed these symbols, these hieroglyphs, held real magical power. The idea was that to write something was to actually bring it into existence. They saw it as this divine gift from Thoth, their god of wisdom.
But then, silence. For over 1,400 years, nobody could read them. An entire civilization's history just locked away. So how on earth could one of the greatest writing systems in human history just completely vanish from our memory? Well, that is the mystery we are here to solve. Okay, so let's start with the lost language. Because to really get a handle on the breakthrough, you first have to appreciate just how big this problem was. I mean, we're not talking about just a forgotten script here. This was a total intellectual blackout that went on for generation after generation. Just look at this timeline. It really shows you the sheer scale of what we're talking about. Hieroglyphs were in use for over 3,500 years. That is way, way longer than our modern alphabet has even been around. But as new empires and new religions came along, that knowledge just faded away. Until finally, in 394 CE, the last known scribe carved the last symbol. And that's when the Great Silence began.
So you might be asking, why was it so hard to just relearn it? Well, it's because this was not a simple ABC alphabet like we have. Think about it. We have 26 letters. The Egyptians, they used a library of almost 1,000 different signs. And to make it even harder, a single sign could be used in a bunch of completely different ways.
Okay, let's break this down. You had phonograms, which were signs that represented sounds, kind of like our letters. So the owl symbol, that was the M sound. Simple enough. But then you had ideograms, where the picture represented a whole idea, like a drawing of a sun disk meant sun or day. And on top of that, you had determinatives. These were silent signs they'd stick at the end of a word just to clarify what category it was in. Can you imagine trying to learn that? A single picture could be a letter, a whole word, or just a silent hint. It's mind-boggling.
Because it was so complex, being able to read and write was incredibly rare. We're talking only about 1% of the entire population. 1%! And that was mostly the elite priests and scribes who had to train for more than 10 years to master it. It was basically a secret knowledge. And well, when that small group of people disappeared, the knowledge just vanished right along with them.
So for 1,400 years, brilliant scholars tried to crack this code, and they all failed. They were missing one crucial piece of the puzzle, a key. And then in 1799, completely by accident, they found it, buried in the Egyptian sand. Picture this. It's 1799. Napoleon's army is in Egypt. A bunch of his soldiers are building a fort in a town called Rosetta, and they stumble on this big, dark slab of stone covered in writing. They had absolutely no idea at the time, but they had just found the single most important object for understanding ancient Egypt. So here's what made the Rosetta Stone so special. On the top part, you have the mysterious hieroglyphics. In the middle, another Egyptian script they couldn't read, called Demotic. But the bottom section was written in ancient Greek, and that was a language scholars absolutely knew how to read. It was a perfect translation guide, hiding in plain sight. I mean, this was the aha moment for everyone studying Egypt. For the very first time, they had a parallel text. They knew that all three of these scripts were saying the exact same thing. The race to crack the code was officially on.
But, having the key to the lock and actually knowing how to turn it, well, those are two very different things. The Rosetta Stone was like a treasure map, but the treasure itself was still buried deep inside the code.
Believe it or not, it still took another 23 years of intense, painstaking work to finally crack it. You had scholars all over Europe in this frantic race to be the first one, but they all kept hitting the exact same brick wall. They were all stuck on the idea that hieroglyphs were only pictures that represented ideas. And that's when the real breakthrough came. Someone realized the system was a hybrid. It wasn't just pictures. A lot of the symbols, especially the ones inside those oval shapes called cartouches that spelled out royal names like Ptolemy or Cleopatra, they were being used phonetically, for their sound. It was an alphabet, hidden right there in plain sight all along. The final step was really the work of two brilliant rivals. First, there was Thomas Young, an English physicist who made this huge initial leap.
He proved that some of the signs had to be phonetic. But the guy who really sealed the deal was a French scholar, Jean-François Champollion. And he had a secret weapon. He knew Coptic, which is the last surviving descendant of the ancient Egyptian language. He used that knowledge to match the symbols to the right sounds, and in 1822, boom, he unlocked the entire system.
And just like that, the floodgates opened. Once the code was cracked, we could finally read everything. The stories of pharaohs, the daily lives of workers, the prayers of priests. But in unlocking all that history, scholars found something even more amazing, a secret that connects ancient Egypt directly to you and me.
You see, the greatest secret hidden in the hieroglyphs wasn't actually about what they said.
It was about what they became. And this, right here, is the real twist in the story. The hieroglyphs didn't just die, they evolved.
I'm not kidding. Our ABCs are the direct descendants of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Every single letter you use to type a text or write an email has its roots in these 5,000-year-old pictures. So, how in the world did that happen? It all comes down to this really clever idea called the acrophonic principle. So around 1700 BCE, you had these Semitic-speaking people working in Egypt. They needed a simple way to write stuff down. So they looked at the Egyptian pictures and came up with a hack. They borrowed the pictures, but used them in a totally new way. They decided a picture would represent just the first sound of their word for whatever that picture showed.
Here's the perfect example. The Egyptian hieroglyph for an ox was, a picture of an ox head, okay? The Semitic word for ox was aleph. So they took that ox head picture and said, from now on, this picture just stands for the first sound of aleph, that ah sound. That symbol, aleph, eventually became the Greek letter alpha. And now get this, flip that ancient ox head symbol upside down, and you can still see the horns of the ox in our modern capital letter A. How cool is that?
I mean, this was a total game changer. Suddenly, instead of needing to memorize 1,000 crazy complex symbols, you only needed to learn maybe 20-something simple signs that stood for sounds. It was so much easier to learn, so much easier to use. And this powerful new idea, it started to spread. And what a journey it took. This first alphabet, which we called Proto-Sinaitic, was picked up by the Phoenicians. They were the master traders of the Mediterranean. They passed it on to the Greeks, who made a brilliant little tweak and added vowels. Then the Greeks gave it to the Romans, who developed the Latin alphabet. And that Latin alphabet, it's the very same one we're using right now, a direct, unbroken line stretching all the way back to an ancient Egyptian drawing. So the next time you type out a message, just take a second and remember the history packed inside every single letter. You're typing an ox, a house, a ripple of water. It really makes you wonder, right? Our alphabet started as pictures, and now, in an age filled with emojis and icons, you have to ask, are we kind of circling back to where it all began? What do you think our writing will look like in another 5,000 years?